Toronto might not be the best city to buy a house anymore. Toronto is running out of available land to build new homes on. In the past, most new construction homes were detached or some sort of freehold property. Check out this comparison between the construction and sales of freehold properties and condos. By the way, a freehold property means you own the home and its land. With a condo, you own the interior of the home only, not the land. So the difference is land ownership, which is why condos are typically less expensive in comparison. 24 years ago in 1990, there were 46,000 freehold properties listed on the market through MLS versus 16,000 condos the same year, which means that for every condo listed on the market, there would have been 3 freehold properties for sale at the same time. So we can say that the mix was heavily towards freehold properties with less condos to choose from. Fast forward to the present. The Toronto condo market has grown exponentially. Last year in 2023, 20,000 freehold properties were listed on the market through MLS versus 32,000 condos. That's 60% more condos listed last year than freehold properties. Another way to look at this is the land ownership in Toronto is becoming less common as years go by, with condo ownership becoming more popular as a result. Today, we keep seeing less detached homes being built. Instead, we're seeing more and more condo towers and low-rise buildings in Toronto. Think about the area that you live in. There's probably a fairly new condo building nearby that just randomly popped up. And these condos are in fact a great solution since it allows for more homes and more families to live on in a single parcel of land. Here's an example of how valuable land is. I remember there was a house on a street close to the street I grew up on in Toronto. The house itself was small, but the land was massive. The backyard was so big that it was big enough to eventually build about 24 homes on that single piece of land. So examples like this become one of the solutions for the housing crisis in the city. Land with existing houses that are usually older or even commercial plazas with parking lots that are somewhat run down looking often become a target by developers to get turned into multi-residential properties like high and low rise condos. There are 134 condo projects currently under construction in Toronto as of this video recording, and there's also 92 in registration or marketing phases and expected to launch sometime in the future. Condos have become somewhat of a solution for the Toronto housing crisis because of the increasing urbanization and population growth leading to our high demand for housing. And as a result of this increasing demand, home prices will keep skyrocketing due to limited inventory. Even these new condos in Toronto being built are not that cheap to buy despite being on the lower side of the price scale for Toronto home buyers. Some downtown projects cost north of $1,600 per square foot, so a one-bedroom condo could easily go for $800,000, but typically broken down through the developer's deposit structure. There is a lack of supply in the city, which is why we always see the market lean towards a seller's market, which buyers have more or less no choice to be part of if they want to buy something in the city. In the last 5 years, there were 2 times when buyers were able to take advantage of a cool down market, and this was during the pandemic in 2020 when home prices took a nosedive. The other time was just last year in 2023 when an increase in overall borrowing costs caused a drop in home prices. In fact, we're still in a market transition right now during January 2024 as the economy and government make adjustments to counter inflation. In the meantime, and in the long run, what is the solution to create more housing that could eventually and permanently bring down Toronto home prices? Honestly, nothing. That's why building outside of Toronto has become a priority. But this has to be done with careful consideration because policymakers need to think about how they're spending billions of dollars and committing extremely limited resources when putting houses in places people might possibly refuse to move to if they're in the middle of nowhere. Yet a vast majority of new construction homes have been on vacant land just outside of the city. So to increase supply across the GTA, large parcels of land that was previously part of the Greenbelt were recently removed. Even developers made private proposals to use specific Greenbelt land for new housing that was eventually approved. And while housing in areas outside of Toronto might flourish, it could probably take decades if these areas were to become something similar to what Toronto currently is. Until then, if that ever happens, Toronto will likely maintain its position as the #1 city to live in all of Canada. And as the #1 city in all of Canada, Toronto rightfully demands the highest prices, which brings us to the second reason. Other than land, why else is it so expensive to buy in Toronto? One of the reasons is because of top schools. The University of Toronto is among amongst the top 1% in the world. Because of this, students from around the world target the university for their post-secondary studies, and in 2022 to 2023, the school saw more than 86,000 full-time enrollments. New graduates from the top schools in Toronto also means there should be some of the top employers nearby as well, adding to why population growth increases every year. As a result, home prices and rents both trend upwards. Companies like Google, Amazon, Apple, and more than 2,000 tech startups attract top talent from around the world. In 2018, the average home price was $760,000 in Toronto. By October of the same year, the average was just over $1.1 million. That's a 45% increase in 5 years, or annualized at 9% increase every year. But how are people supposed to save at this rate when salary increases are not keeping up? The average salary increase is roughly 3%. How is anyone affording a home if their income is never increasing at a rate of home prices increasing? The simple answer is that more savings are needed, which is obviously easier said than done. Let's say you're a home buyer who puts together $150,000 as a down payment on the purchase of a $1 million house. But now let's say you decide you don't like the options at that price point, or maybe you want better options for your loan through the bank with a 20% down payment instead to get that same $1 million property. So over the next year, you end up saving another $50,000 to reach that 20% down payment. But by the end of that same year, that $1 million property is now going for about $1.1 mil based on home prices increasing at a 9% rate. And the $200,000 you saved up is now just 18%. So in the end, you end up buying a property that you could have purchased for $915,000 a year ago. So holding on to cash and waiting to time the market may not always be a good idea, depending on what your goals are. By the way, my name is Fred Tam. I'm a real estate broker here in Toronto with Home Realty. Thanks for checking out my channel where I provide you with information to increase your knowledge of the real estate market while helping you reach your real estate goals. If you're enjoying the content, hit subscribe to stay updated. I live in Toronto, so you might be wondering, why am I making this video about Toronto possibly not being a good place to purchase a home anymore? Although I believe Toronto is an awesome city that offers anyone who lives here the opportunity to pursue their passions, to create wonderful connections, and to live out their dreams, I'm also not biased towards the city. Toronto is amazing and very attractive, but arguably it isn't for everyone, especially when homeowners are facing a potential massive increase in property taxes this year, adding yet another reason why it's becoming too expensive to live in Toronto. Not only are home prices expected to go up this year, property taxes are also expected to go up by 10.5%. This works out to be more than an extra $300 on average every year for homeowners. In fact, there's a potential for the increase to be as high as 16.5%, and we should know more about this on January 26th of this year. Even though property taxes are normally only associated with homeowners since renters do not tangibly pay property taxes, these additional costs tend to indirectly impact renters as landlords gradually increase rent to cover their expenses. Mayor Olivia Chow also called this the first step in the process of getting our city back on track. Let me know in the comments what you think she's really implying there. Remember when John Tory announced a property tax increase of 5.5% in 2023? That doesn't seem so bad anymore, does it? And despite property taxes always going up with homeowners facing higher costs, Toronto is always a seller's market. Toronto homebuyers often wonder, when is it a good time to buy? Should you buy during a balanced market? The reality is that you can consider it to be a good time to buy whenever you can, because timing the market will usually not make much of a difference. Remember, the average Toronto working employee's savings is not keeping up with the average Toronto home price increase. Yet the demand for housing is increasing beyond the rate of supply. You wouldn't have been able to perfectly time a home purchase during the pandemic, since that was an unprecedented event. And knowing exactly when mortgage rates begin to pull back isn't something we are certain of either, which are two reasons why buyers markets only happen outside of our control. Those who were able to pull the trigger during the pandemic and during the last year when home prices came back down made a solid move by taking advantage of the market that no one really had any control over. Fast forward to the present. The general consensus is that mortgage rates are going to come down this year. Rates on fixed mortgages have dropped by a full percentage point in the past few months, opening up an opportunity for the spring housing market. With buyers re-entering the market, there is without a doubt a strong potential for home prices to bounce back, which is also why we expect to see more inventory as homeowners take advantage of higher market values. Since history often repeats itself, Toronto home prices should eventually reach a new peak as we go through typical real estate and economic cycles. If you're a home buyer, it's not something you want to wait around for to happen, because the path to success is to take massive, determined action. And I understand that success means different things for everyone. For some, it means to live in a giant house, no matter where it is. I remember during the pandemic, people were actually selling their houses to move out of the city, which was made possible by the option to work from home. Working from home also had a huge impact on real estate markets. Many employers had no choice but to conform to the growing popularity of work from home. In fact, I've had conversations with people who wouldn't work for an employer unless they were offered to work from home full-time. So it's truly changed how buyers prioritize the location of their next home. Commuting to work didn't matter as much anymore. Taking the train or driving a few times a week to the office wasn't a big deal compared to the bigger picture, which arguably is having a roof over your head. In fact, Toronto has more than 10 transit expansion projects in varying phases of planning, design, and construction. And when you consider accessibility through transit systems, or the fact that you would no longer have to go into the office at all, it gave reason for people to move further north. This created a hot market in Northern Ontario, and in some cases, bidding wars had cottages going for 170% of their asking prices. But be careful with this one, because even those cottages are probably not worth as much as they used to be, since employers are slowly asking their employees to come back to the office, and a commute of 3 hours or more isn't all that great in my opinion. And if you need help navigating the home buying process, check out this video next. Thanks for watching.